All right, this is Todd Atkins, and I'm here with Miguel Dorati and John Perretti, and we're going to talk about the UFC years. John Perretti, the UFC years that he spent as matchmaker, 5 years. And before we start, I want to thank our sponsors, Live to Fight Design and Bet Stamp. And you can find Live to Fight Design on Instagram at Live to Fight Design. If you use my name, Todd Atkins, you can get $20 off an order, fight banner and gym banner. And Bet Stamp is a gambling sponsor, new gambling sponsor for us. And John, as always, me and Miguel, we're always honored when you take time.
Todd, I'm sorry. Let me just interrupt you. But if you use my name, it'll cost you twice as much.
But we are always honored when you take time to discuss, because it's always like just great knowledge and discussion. It's like second to none.
Yeah, history that cannot be lost. And, in the current state of things, it might be. And that's, the tragedy. So let's do this.
Yeah. So, I wanted to, maybe I'll let John start. Maybe you could talk about when you were first assigned as matchmaker to the UFC, maybe when you remember when that was, maybe what show it was and all that.
I think they did 16 shows before I got there. But let me just say that I want to thank you two guys, because you guys are the only guys who have the balls to do this. So it takes some big testicular power to invite me on and not know what I'm going to say. And I think that's one of the problems. You ask the question, and I'm going to give you the honest answer. Meyerowitz always used to say, everybody remembers what they remember, which is absolutely true. I admire him right up till the end, where I thought, I owned the show. But let me start at the beginning. So, the UFC puts extreme fighting out of business. So Donald Zuckerman and I decide that my second idea, I had 3 ideas that I wanted to do, was going to be a pro-am first professional grappling event, the Contenders, right? The greatest show that no one ever saw. The greatest card. I don't know. You guys look at that card. I mean, remember we did an interview on it. I mean, even to this day, that card is just exemplary. I just think it's amazing. Anyway, so what's his name gets a really nice guy, great fighter. He goes to Abu Dhabi, and he gets a career out of it. And I'm sorry, I'm 16 concussions in.
Matt Hume.
And thank you. And when you hear me stop and stutter like that, that's your role. That's your cue. Thank you.
I'll do the best I can, John. You're hard.
Thank you.
I don't know everything you do. I know that.
So we do the Contenders, and I put a lot of money in it, and it fails miserably and gets shot in the leg on purpose by USA Wrestling. Anyway, so it's a great show. About it must have been about a week later, somebody calls me from the UFC and says we'd like you to come in. I think it was Bob's partner. He's a lawyer, and I can't remember his name. But I think I mentioned it the other day when we did an interview. So I might remember it. He calls me in, and Bob and him are there.
McLaren?
And they tell me, no.
Oh, okay.
He was a lawyer. I can't remember his name. But anyway, he calls me in, and he says, they two together. I'm sitting in their office on whatever, 57th Street or something, and they were talking about that, that my matches were better than theirs, and our fights were better than theirs, and they really wanted me to come on and take a look. So if you hire me to do something on their show, which to me was just chock full of fucked up things going on. And I was openly critical about it. And, I criticized refereeing, I criticized matchmaking, right? Purposeful mismatches. I criticize everything because I'm a critic. And a perfectionist, and that's a personality fault. So I go in there, and whatever his name is, he says, I apologize too. He says that we want you to come and work for us. And I said, okay, well, I have some questions, and I need to look at stuff. And I think they gave me paperwork, and they gave me, like, I don't know, film or some shit to look at, and I don't remember, but I said I need a couple of weeks. So, and I went home to Long Island, to my office, and I had moved from the city. And I started looking at stuff, and I started to talk to people. And I was very concerned because I thought that there was a lot of bullshit involved in what they were doing. And I thought it could be, really great. But basically, in my stupid mind, I was going to bring myself, my talent pool, my abilities, and my experience as a producer, a co-producer with Tom Zuckerman, to the UFC, and the UFC would change. Well, that's not what happened. In fact, it was an uphill battle. But I did a lot of homework, and I talked to a lot of people that said that they were going to be on the show, or they had already agreed that they were going to be on the show. And I always asked the same questions because I always wanted a pyramidal system that was legitimate, and that this guy beat this guy who beat this guy who beat this guy who beat this guy who beat this. So it just keeps moving. So we know what the pinnacle looks like, right? So I went back and I said, and I talked to people, and they said, well, we have an agreement and we have this. I said, can you put that in writing? And a couple of managers put it in writing, and they said, well, you're going to get the same money as we promised so-and-so. And I was like, can you say that again? Because I was recording all these things, right? And they said, well, yeah, you're going to, we do this and that and this. I was like, oh, okay. Well, let me look at this guy and see who's he fought. He hasn't fought anybody. So okay, well then, but he's so and so. I was like, well, I don't know who he is because he hasn't fought anybody, so I've never seen him fight. So this and that. So I go back 2 weeks later, or maybe even a little less, and I go back in there and I said, guys, I this is a great opportunity. I really appreciate you being in here. However, I have a big question. And I said, what do you guys think that question was?
Are you going to be given full power and be in charge, or are you going to have influences?
It's pretty good. But my question was about the way that it was at that time, not really my new role yet, because I didn't accept the job yet, right? What do you think, Todd?
What do you think what I think the question was?
Yeah, one question.
Well, you kind of already mentioned what it was, didn't you, when you said you asked what the way it was, how they were normally doing it, right? Isn't that what you kind of mentioned?
Is this a sport, or is this a spectacle? Maybe something along those lines, because you're a sport-driven guy.
Yeah. What I asked is, who makes the budget?
Yeah, makes sense.
And he said, I almost had that guy's name, by the way. He says, so-and-so. the matchmaker. And they said, why? I said, well, I just got done talking to like 15 or 20 people, and they all said they're going to give me kickbacks of up to a certain amount of money for a certain amount of time for bringing their guy in. And they were like, they looked at each other. I remember they looked at each other hard. And you know, to his credit,
Wow.
Bob Meyerowitz always had a poker face. I don't know if he played poker. I know he played hard. But he had a poker face. But the other guy, he didn't. And those two just cracked. I watched them crack because they rightfully so, they didn't know. And you could tell by the matches, they had no fucking idea what was going on. You know, Bob liked heavyweight boxers, although he boxed supposedly as a middleweight. That doesn't make any sense to me. But that was a problem too, you know, that I had to contend with. That, you know, he loved the heavyweights, and I said on air, big guys accept mediocrity easily. Middleweights and the lightweights are our best fights.
Yeah.
And I was wrong. I made some bad matches. I thought guys let me down. You know, Pat Miletich said, it's great. Pat Miletich said, you know, a lot of people take credit for, you know, for coining mixed martial arts, but it was John Perretti that coined mixed martial arts. And then I did this incredible match that I was so excited about. You know, it was Mikey Burnett and Pat Miletich, and I just thought, oh my God, I've outdone myself here. This is an amazing fight. And it wasn't. And then Bob just ripped me a new asshole on that, laughed at me in front of people and stuff. And I was just like, wow. I was like, I was like, oh my God. And then I remember somebody took a picture of me going, like looking up, going, what the fuck do I do now? And you know, it was embarrassing. However, so I came in and I wanted to do a women's program, and Bob wanted nothing of it. And I wanted to do the same 5 weight classes that I had in extreme fighting, and Bob didn't want that. And so I got it down to, I think, 2 weight classes, and I wanted to bring talent in, real fucking talent, right? And there were times where, you know, like fucking Dan Severin. Well, I want Dan called me and I want Dan to come in. I said, Dan, tie his shoes. Like, what are you talking about? I said, this is a different world now, you know? And I said, he goes, no, you give him a top 20 guy. I was like, all right, I'll give him a top 20 guy who maybe can't defend the tackle. Maybe that's how I'll do it. You know, maybe I'm trying to be fair to Dan, but on the air, I wasn't fair to him because they said, I remember Wormy said, was it Wormy? No, it wasn't Wormy. It was, who the fuck is the guy who I was color. Who's the other guy?
Blatnick?
No, not Blatnick. Don't get me started on Blatnick.
No, you're yeah, no.
The guy on the mic. What's his name? He still works there, right?
Rogan?
No,
No,
the
Goldberg?
guy. Goldberg, thank you.
He's not with
So
them anymore.
Goldberg.
They cut him loose.
Oh, I didn't.
You didn't know
I
that?
didn't know.
They
No.
He got
fired him.
drunk and got cut loose.
Yeah, he had
I
an
never watched.
incident
Well,
he had an incident backstage that Dana White kind of saw.
I never got drunk there. So, so anyway, I cut myself loose. So he says, what was his first name?
Mike.
So Mike says, well, here's this great fight, you know, that you didn't. I said, whoa. I did not put, I remember saying, oh, no, you gotta, let me make this clear.
This is Severin and Rizzo, right? This is Severin Rizzo?
Yeah. So I said, let me be clear about this. I did not make put this man on the show. Oh, he's our great champion and this and that and this. And I said, no, he can't tie his shoes. He doesn't have a finishing hole in his entire body, I think I said. And I said, I got to tell you, Bob, a top 20 guy now is a very different animal than, putting him up against, I don't know, some schmuck, right? Some Ferozzo or whatever right? It's like, it's not, it's a different world, Bob. You're going to see this. I'm just lucky if he gets across the ring. So he gets in there and I put him against Pedro, who I was ranking him about 20, right? And I like Pedro, man. He's a fucking tough guy. But it was almost like Dan was in slow motion. If you recall, he like ran across the ring to get that tackle in and Pedro just backed up. And he missed and crashed into like a parked car or something, I mean, it was pathetic. And Dan Severn threatened my fucking life after that. And his wife or girlfriend or whatever the fuck she was, they threatened my life.
Becky Levo.
For saying that about him. But it was the truth.
No,
The guy
absolutely.
Didn't have a fucking finishing hold in his entire body.
No, and absolutely. And the fact of the matter is, in that fight, you kind of go back and look at it. He took the pro wrestler's way out. He took a couple of leg kicks and was like, "Hey, that's enough. I'm getting paid this amount. That's the show. I don't. That's not giving your all. He didn't give his all. He didn't even. Once he got kicked once, he was done. And that's not, John Perretti's expectations of a fighter.
But no offense to Pedro, but he kicked me for fun a couple of times, and it was like fucking, and I know what I'm doing, but that's like Maurice Smith, taking a whack at you. I mean, those fuckers are chopping down trees from the bottom up. And no offense to Pedro. I mean, I got to tell you, he was a big, strong guy. But it was just the stupidest fucking thing, Bob, to put that motherfucker on the show. It showed the stupidity of it, but it also showed the diametric opposite of what the ultimate was versus extreme fighting. And here I was, in a position where I thought I could really help the show. But, there were people of very short stature that could get their tongue just right in his ass perfectly and influence him. And I was obviously too tall for that.
No, you had an ethic about what you were doing that was obvious from the very beginning. Now, to get back to this, I believe Art Davie has stated in interviews and stuff that Art's last UFC was the Japan one, which means UFC 16 was the next one. And that would have been your first UFC, headlined by Frank and Zinoviev. Does that sound familiar? Is that correct?
I did UFC Japan because I had to deal with the thing, and John McCarthy and I did UFC Japan quite later.
Okay. Now,
so I think it was 16 or something. It was.
Yeah, UFC 16 was Zinoviev and Shamrock as the main event, and
but I worked before that.
Okay.
Let's. Do you guys have your little computers running or some shit?
Yep, I'm up. I'm here.
You're gonna back up a little then.
Okay, so now I go. Let me see. Now, obviously,
isn't it interesting that you're looking this shit up and my name's not on there?
No, it's not. No, they don't really list the matchmakers. I've been trying to find something that lists them, but that's not the case.
Yeah, I tried to find. I tried to
UFC 15 was Mo Smith against Tank Abbott, Couture and Belfort.
That's me.
Okay.
Look at the talent, and guess who got stuck in there and by Bob?
Yeah, Severn.
Yeah, but who else?
We got let me see. You got guys like Harry Moskowitz, Carlos Barreto, who I know you're not a fan of.
Who?
Carlos Barreto.
Oh no, not a fan. wait a second, but you got Tank Abbott. I didn't put Tank in there.
Yeah, no.
So I give him my world champion, right, Maurice Smith, and he makes Tank look like Barishnikov. He kicked him so hard, and he was jumping so high, and I told him at an after dinner party when he was jacked out of his fucking mind, right, that he said, I got off a bar stool for this fight. I said, I invite you to this fight. Bob's right there on the other side of the table with him sitting next to him. And I was right across from him. And he was like trying to be his, like, him imitative fucking, I don't know, of whom, that, he would fight or fuck anybody and try to get really imitative, really, really intimidating with me. And I don't remember who else was there, but I didn't take any shit from him. And I certainly didn't run away from him like I did Ken Shamrock in a fucking hotel, like just through a fucking restaurant. But anyway, the point is that I told him, I said, he made you look like fucking Barishnikov. And he said, well, I just got a bar stool to fight him. I said, man, you were jumping around like a fucking idiot, out there because you didn't know how to block even a mild leg kick. And let me tell you something.
Now, if I go back to, I'm sorry, but if I go back to UFC 14, that's Maurice Smith Coleman and Kevin Jackson's on there.
That's me.
Okay.
So, where else would they have found that kind of talent?
Yeah, no, that's what it looks like. Like I said, Davies' contract ended with between 15 and 16 when they did Japan.
Didn't you just say that I just did 13?
No, that was 16. Let me go back to 13. We'll go back to 13.
No, I just want to know because to me, that's contradiction immediately. If you're calling all that talent out, Jackson and this and that, and all these great fucking fighters that were my fighters.
Yeah.
From the contenders and from, right. So they didn't have those fighters before I came in there. So we'll go back one more, please.
Okay. One more was Mesger, Ortiz, Enson Inoue, Royce Alger.
Those are my guys.
Okay.
That's my fight. Go back one more.
Okay, let's go to 12, which is called Judgment Day. And here you got Bolander, Nick Sanzo. Takahashi.
Bolander against who?
Nick Sanzo, who was a upstate New York police officer. This sounds more like Art Davies stuff. You did have
me.
Belfort against Scott Ferozzo, Severn against Coleman.
Just think about it.
Yeah.
That's a comedy act. Belfort against Scott Ferozzo. I mean, the only thing I could do with Scott and Tank Abbott later on is put them against each other. That's how fucking ridiculously out of place they became. I think it's an embarrassment just to say. And I know Victor Belfort. I know him since he's 14 years old. I remember when he was a fucking purple belt.
Yeah, no.
And Carlson Gracie and I were really close.
And so when you did the UFC Brazil, you put Vitor against Vanderlei. We'll get to that, but
whoa, what a fucking great match! Think about that. I mean, come on. Now you're talking about two talented motherfuckers who hate each other just stylistically.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, no, that was the same show with Miletich and Burnett, which let you down. But you're right. I'm absolutely spot on paper, a golden match, but that's the thing about matchmaking is sometimes, it's up and down. It's, you can't, you're not choreographing anything. So sometimes they stalemate, I was at that show in Brazil, actually. I remember seeing that stuff live, and the Belfort Vanderlei fight was just something out of this world. If you remember, Sergio Bottarelli was the co-promoter, the local co-promoter.
Another fucking big shot.
And I looked at, I was with Sergio when that fight started, and I said, "You got enough security?" And he said, "I don't know," because Brazil was a hot show, and just to give people an idea of the scope of things, we're in Sao Paulo at a Holiday Inn. You know what I mean? Do you remember the Holiday Inn? Because it wasn't like nowadays where you're in Vegas casinos or anything like that. This was small time stuff still, you know, out front of that whole street was filled with, you know, we'll just call it street activity. You know what I mean? It's like girls and drugs.
Street activity, like 5-year-old boys being sold on the fucking corners. Street activity.
John always tells it like it is, you know, and that's
fucking really scary, man. And I'm a New Yorker.
Yeah. No, me too. And I went there. I went with my wife, and I didn't take my wife to the show. I left her in the hotel because I was worried, you know. And so yeah, it was definitely a different ball game than now. Now, but
what a fight. So Belfort, you know, was talking that he was going to go to the Olympics as a boxer and that he was going to represent Brazil in the Olympics as a boxer. Well, that didn't pan out. But more importantly is he beats my fucking axe murderer. Wow.
Now, let me ask you this, because this is one of those stories.
Who I found on the beach, by the way.
Those guys were a different ballgame. When I took my guy to fight Rafael Cordero, his kickboxing instructor.
I remember him.
I took my guy. My guy fought him in Rafael's last MMA fight in Brazil, where for 30 minutes in a 30-minute straight fight, I was in the corner of that fight. So I know those guys pretty well too. They were very intimidating. But let me ask you, Vitor famously checked out of the hotel, left for another hotel, and sent his mother at you to negotiate more money. Is that a story you remember, or do you remember that around the Vanderlei fight?
You guys are sitting down, right?
Yeah.
Man, the MMA world's gonna they're gonna shit their pants when they hear this. Well, I got a Victor Belfort story for you. And Meyerowitz better fucking remember it too, because I had to fucking perform miracles backstage. But that fight. And Bob, he lost. There was nothing he could do because Victor wasn't going to fight. And Victor was back there bawling his eyes out, crying and crying and crying. And I told him, man, you're the future. You can beat this guy. You just can't play it like you want to play it. I said, you hit pretty hard. I wouldn't say he was heavy-handed, but all you have to do is beat this guy. To beat this guy, I'm not saying I could beat this guy. I couldn't beat either of them. Even as a purple belt, he worked me. But he's not going to expect you to do what he doesn't know you can do. You know, he really probably expects you to be just another jiu-jitsu guy that he's gonna fucking knock their socks off. And I had to fucking talk him into fighting. And Bob Meyerowitz better fucking remember that. I mean, if he wants to give me credit for anything, I got that fucking guy to fight that night. And
no, I absolutely
what a fucking fight he gave.
No, I absolutely remember that. And stylistically, you know, the Thai boxer was kind of wide open, and when he got hit, he backed straight up, which plays right into Vitor's game. You know, so I think
but you're telling me that you want to coin him as a Thai boxer? He was too eloquent for that. He had been fighting jiu-jitsu guys on the beach when I met him. You know, you can't just put him in there as some fucking Thai boxer. This guy knew jiu-jitsu guys in their sleep. Mm-hmm. You know, I my axe murderer was a fucking force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, I got to interview him after that fight. I was the only person he would do an interview with because we knew each other a little bit. And I've never seen somebody more crushed or so sad about, he was just so disappointed about having lost that opportunity kind of thing. And Vitor was like,
he got beaten.
yeah.
Not many people can say they beat him.
Yeah.
That's how fucking dominant that man was.
Yeah. And then the moments after that fight in the crowd with Pele jumping into the ring and, kind of antagonizing the crowd, that was some tense stuff there. And that's the stuff that makes, I'll tell you this series of UFCs that we're about to talk about with John Perretti, I believe saved this sport because the elevation that was about to be shown in talent really made it a sport. It took it out of, Scott Ferozzo. I like Scott. I've interviewed Scott.
But I didn't say anything bad about him personally.
No. I understand, but you're absolutely right. I mean, I'll sum it up. He's a car salesman.
He's a fucking embarrassment physically.
Yeah, he's a tough car salesman. You know what I mean? And some of those are
it's like saying that who's that fucking boxer?
Or Jimison?
No, the big fat boxer.
Butterbean.
Thank you. That's the kind of it's a circus show. It's fucking stupid. Who was the little black guy that he's like 199 pounds? He's a really nice guy. I think he's dead. And then we did that fucking show that got financed by the Russians. Mike and I did it for Bob. What the fuck was it called? It was a place in the ground that you dug to throw bodies in. That was the definition of it in Russian.
Ooh, okay. It was
what was that show called? No, it wasn't a UFC show. It was Bob later on.
Yama?
Yama?
Yes, Yama. So a Yama in Russian is a place in the ground that you throw bodies in. I know that because I speak a little bit of Russian and I can curse pretty well in Russian. and I had a lot of Russian friends growing up. So we did Yama, and then who's that black guy who fought Butterbean? And he was a really nice guy. He was on one of those first UFCs. You can't look it up?
I am.
Zane Frazier?
No. What? Who?
Zane Frazier?
No. If you say his name, I'll recognize it. I think he's dead.
But he fought Butterbean in a boxing match or an MMA fight?
MMA fight.
Okay. I'm on it.
Smith? Pat Smith?
Huh?
Hey, yeah, Pat Smith.
Thank you, Pat Smith. So really nice. Is he dead?
Yeah,
yes.
He is.
Yeah. So Pat and we had some good conversations. He's really concerned about that fight. And I told him I said, if Pat, you really understand that if you only have one weapon in this fight and you move around and use that one leg kick weapon, this fight is over. And he embraced me after that fight and said, thank you. You coached me for this fight and this and that. And basically, I wasn't a matchmaker. I was just a commentator. And the reason I wasn't a fucking matchmaker on that show is because Bob got some other fucking matchmaker and he didn't want me to matchmake the show. I was appalled. I was like, you gotta be fucking kidding. For all the fucking work I did for you, you're gonna put some schmuck in there to make matches? Which he did. And I don't know who it was, but they're schmuck.
Now, let me present to you that I love your no nonsense style. I'm from New York and stuff like that, but sometimes.
Why do you say it's no nonsense?
Because you tell it like it is, you tell it like you feel, but there are times where other people couch things like I'll give you an example. At the UFC Brazil, I remember a moment in the lobby where Carlos Barreto, who is not one of your favorite guys, was soliciting you to fight. And he
why?
came with it He could. Well, that's what I want to know. He came at you with a translator, soliciting a fight, and you were very harsh with him. And a lot of people would have taken a different approach and been like, okay, we don't need you or whatever, and not had him. But you told it like it is. What do you regret that? I mean, I know you don't regret it, and you're right in what you were saying. But what is that all about?
Well, what I have to ask you, what's with the rhetoric that you're giving me right now? Because you're saying do you regret that? I know you don't regret it. That's rhetorical, right? You're not. You ask the fucking questions. I'll give you the answers.
Yeah, no. I'm sorry. So
I'm
why
just,
would
I'm
you?
just,
Why,
hey, I'm just fucking with you. Just
John,
fucking with you, man.
John, I love you, man.
I'm not serious. I'm just fucking with you. I want to
No,
see
but
you
seriously,
just wiggle like
why
that.
would you? Why
Got
would
that
you?
little wiggle thing going on when I said that.
No. You kind of.
I don't remember.
Okay.
I can't tell you.
Hold
I have
on.
no fucking idea
let
what
me
I said
interject
to him.
here. Miguel told
Go,
me the
Todd.
story, and he said, you really tore into Barreto and basically told him he sucked, and you would never let him in the UFC. And Miguel was pretty taken aback by it because he was like, "Holy crap! John's just tearing this guy a new ass." So he was like, "Wow."
I don't remember what I said, Miguel, and I will apologize to you that I don't remember, right? But I have no fucking idea. I didn't. Was he your fighter? Is that why you're so?
No, I'm friends with him, but why? What don't you like about Barreto? Because he's a big, Brazilian jiu-jitsu guy, big heavyweight, and obviously you saw something, and I defer to what you say.
I thought he was mediocre. I didn't need him.
Okay.
I mean, how many fucking guys do you need? This isn't puppetry. I'm not out here to Miguel to offend you as a matchmaker. It's just not my role. I don't. Quite frankly, until you said 20 minutes ago that you were the matchmaker after me, I didn't even know. Honestly, so
I appreciate it.
I just thought he was mediocre. I don't need another mediocre guy out there. There's so much talent out there. I mean, think about it. You want to get better than Mario Sperry?
Hold on. Miguel didn't tell you he was a matchmaker after you. Miguel was a matchmaker for Hook and Shoot and Bodog Fight. He didn't matchmake for UFC.
No,
he did
what I said was
he matchmaked a lot of shows for other promotions.
I've never heard of those promotions, so I apologize again.
And what I did say was I felt like John was my role model. That's kind of, so I kind of followed in his footsteps, and that's what I'll say that respectfully, because I do feel that I felt like we had the same attitude about things, because I could be very harsh, and I took some of my friends that were fighters and put them in some of the hardest fights that I could possibly do. And I tried, and I have no money to show for it in terms of like, I poured all my money into the fighters. So like in that respect, I think we philosophically match up a little bit. And
identical. I gave my friends the hardest fucking fights of their lives. But once you make the match, Miguel, you can still sit at ringside and cheer your friend on. Yeah. I got criticized for that a long time. I said, no, my job was done. I gave him the hardest fucking fight I could, and now I'm going to cheer for him. Oh, that's not right. Oh, fuck you. That's not right. That's my prerogative.
Now, I want to ask you about you. We had talked in the last interview about, you had mentioned a top 5 like Shamrock, Lober, Zinoviev, the middleweights. Talk about that top 5, because once you got to the UFC, you made Frank versus Zinoviev very quickly. What are your?
No, you don't have any idea how much fucking work I put into that, because everybody talked to Bob and said that it's no way Frank's going to beat him. You're going to lose your fucking champion. And so, I mean, I was shoveling shit all day long. I just couldn't. I'm not the kind of guy. I'm not an offensive guy. I'm a counterpuncher. So I don't go and bully people. If someone approaches me in a bad way, I will react to them. Right. So I gave fucking guys tough fucking fights. And people said, well, you were cheering for so-and-so, and, Randleman wanted to kill me. Coleman didn't talk to me for 2 years and threatened my life. So there was a lot of animosity, right? So, okay, let's talk about this again. Let's talk about this. So we have the most frightening middleweight division. I mean, it's frightening. And you could juxtapose them any way you want because they're fucking crazy talented, right? You have Frank, who's the cream of the crop. You have Zinoviev, who's got a big, what, you don't like this conversation? You have to leave?
He'll come back in just a moment.
How old
Miguel,
is he
where'd
now?
you go?
How old is he now, Miguel?
He's probably around the same age as me. I'm 47, so yeah. Miguel, how
Probably
old
had
are
to go
you?
to the bathroom.
No, I ran to get ice. Sorry.
John said you probably didn't like the discussion, so you just got up and left,
No. I'm just unbelievable. I'm honored by the discussion because I'm getting to hear the real deal. I have impressions, and we'll get into this because you're talking about this top 5, and then you were the matchmaker for the Horn fight with Frank.
Well, we're doing
Jeremy.
Zinoviev Shamrock. He's still talking about this, so let's
Let's
continue,
go. Let's
John,
stick
please.
with that first.
So we have Shamrock, the cream of the crop. We got Zinoviev, who's got this monster right hand, and his leg locks are they're vicious. And he is just as tough as nails. We got John Lober, who's truly psychotic and jacked and strong as a fucking lion. And, I guess he's, he had a really good teacher. I forgot his name, the white guy, the jiu-jitsu guy. Yeah, he was a nice guy. I can't remember his name.
Yeah.
But John can remember his name, I think, wherever John is. I used to speak to him all the time. John Lober's just psycho strong. I mean, it just wrestling with John Lober's was like, he's so strong. And then you got Mario Sperry, just the cream of the jiu-jitsu crop. And you have what's his name? Help me out.
You had Kevin Jackson. You had,
you had Kevin Jackson, but Kevin was incredibly uncoachable. So I can't really put him. In. You have fucking Van Arsdale, who's, in my opinion, is incredibly high. But you had who am I forgetting? Todd. No, that's a B fighter.
No, he's spoiled a couple of fights for you. Let me check out.
Wait. But so Boss Rutan backs out of that fucking deal. He wants to be a heavyweight now at 201 pounds. But he didn't want any part of that. But you got Boss Rutan, so think about it. You got a legitimate stand-up fighter who's heavy-handed, both left and right. And the Brazilians used to fucking mock me because I used to train at Beverly Hills Jiu-Jitsu all the time, and they used to mock me. They used to say, "Oh, that Boss Rutan, he's not very good on the ground." And I said, every fucking fight that he's ever been in ends up on the ground. Everybody is unconscious on the ground. I said, so he must be pretty fucking good on the ground, right? Oh, he can't beat so and so. So if you juxtapose, if you personally juxtapose these fucking 5 guys, right? You could do it any way you want, blindfolded and backwards, and they would be great fights. The weak link with the Zinoviev is that he was injured all the time. He didn't even make the contenders.
Some of the other guys, Carlos Newton.
Oh, you got Henderson.
Oh, Dan Henderson. Okay.
So that's who I was forgetting. You have, I'm sorry, Dan. You have Henderson, you know, so, I mean, that talent pool is so thick. So thick, you know, Greco-Roman champion, fucking, you know, mediocre boxer, who could fucking, he could stand up with anyone. You know, he just had these gifts that were just, you know, so indoctrinated. He was just such a great athlete. My God.
Yeah, no, for
And you
sure.
had Victor Belfort there at
Yeah.
199. So
And
it was so thick.
and that weight class is you know, those are big guys too, you know, so that's very marketable stuff that you were doing. And that's why I present to you that this series of UFCs is what saved the UFC from being a sideshow and turned it into a sport. Before you, Fertitas, Dana White, they didn't even pay attention, but it was because of what you bought that I believe that the worldwide attention started to come. Now let's ask you about the lower weight class. How about guys like Ralph Gracie, John Lewis, and that sort of series of guys? What did you see with them?
Gracie. Health, not Ralph. Health. R's or H's. Well, Health was a arrogant fucking strange guy. That's all I can say. We never really saw eye to eye. But his jiu-jitsu was really wonderful. And he was aggressive, psychotic aggressive. And Donald Zuckerman and I put him up against the greatest boxer in the world, Roy Jones, and who I know a lot about boxing. I'm, you know, third generation pugilist, right? So I grew up, I met, you know, Rocky Marciano in Miami at the Fountain Blue. You know, I mean, I grew up with this. So we really wanted Roy Jones to fight Health. That was my idea.
I
really
remember
wanted
him
that.
calling him out.
So-
I think it was
And
maybe the first
oh,
event.
that was an orchestration,
Yeah.
Todd. We took that pit bull and shook him around a little, and then threw him in there. And Health was right in his fucking face and intimidated the shit out of him. And we offered him $1 million, and he didn't take it, which was pretty smart of him, because it would have been lousy for him career wise. But anyway, but that was our idea, and Health performed, you know, brilliantly with those bulgy eyes. And you know, he was what he was. Now, to answer your question, at the time, it was very difficult, as he said before, to find matches for certain people. So once you create this monster, it was very difficult for me to even get matches against other people. That 3 to 4 years later, after extreme fighting, I could have matched him with 20 people who would have beat him, because he was very one-dimensional.
Now, let me ask you, talk about the Jeremy Horn fight, because Jeremy came from my show. I actually match made 3 or 4 fights for him before he went to UFC. And you know, I thought he was special.
I wasn't aware of that.
And no problem. I have no ego with that, because, you know, you're operating on a different level. But when he showed up, what were your expectations? Because he's like, I think that one of the things that you also bring to the sport, and I remember, I think it was Ron Waterman that fought a fat guy. And like, you know, you're not into, like, you got to look like a fighter kind of thing. And Jeremy sort of is mild-mannered, doesn't look like a fighter. So what were your expectations heading into the Frank fight?
Well, I fucking rolled with that guy. I mean, he was just fucking, I mean, he was like a Gumby or some shit. He had the ability to grapple, and win fights because of his grappling ability. I think Frank. God, I wish I could get Frank on to talk to him about this, but I'd actually text back and forth with him last week. I think Frank was offended. Forgive me, Frank, if I'm wrong, but I think Frank was offended at the low quality of the guy that I put him up against in Jeremy Horn. I think that's the way it went down. And I'm sorry, Frank, if I'm wrong. Please text me immediately and tell me I'm wrong if you're listening when you hear this. But I know we're not live. But I believe that's what it was. I could be wrong. But as I recall, that's what he was offended about. And I told him to not underestimate this kid. No, not underestimate this kid. And I remember Monty Cox coaching and Pat. And I recall that Jeremy was winning that fucking fight.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
So if you just, again, I'll use the word juxtapose. If you just you take Jeremy out of that fight, right? And put Mario Sperry in that fight with Frank. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. Not that I ever said I knew what was going to happen in any fight, but I don't know. I mean, that's like, I don't know, because you would think that Mario is going to work Jeremy, you know? But I don't know.
No. Yeah, no, that's that's the mind of a matchmaker, and that's what I appreciate in these conversations, just the insight.
And then the other thing is, those guys, because they came from me, right? Like Pat was great. I could talk about Pat for a long, long time. Those guys really knew how dangerous Eager was. Zenobia is fucking dangerous. Now you got to remember, I trained with that guy for 5 fucking years before extreme fighting. I mean, we would swim underwater. We would, I mean, if we put him on this show and talk about his training with me, that's a show in itself. I wouldn't even have to say anything on that show. That'd be amazing, Todd. I mean, amazing. And he's in Florida.
John, I wonder if you know that Zinoviev was actually a bodyguard for Jeffrey Epstein.
Know it very well.
Okay, so we don't need to go into that, but we'll stick with fighting and stuff. But
I don't know anything about it.
All I'm saying is that
I know that no one invited me to the island.
No, but I'm just saying that once you get into that world, you're talking about dangerous men on a different level. And Zinoviev had that feel. He's not just an athlete. He was a dangerous dude.
Trust me. He broke my back. Trust me. I know how dangerous he was. I mean, that motherfucker. Well, first of all, he was in Afghanistan, and lost a really close personal friend of his. And he was a Red Beret. And I mean, I know a lot about him. He's actually in my novel as somebody else, but so there's a lot of stories in my novel that make sense. So yeah, and then you got Glover, who was like deadlifting 600 pounds, and it was thick. It was just incredibly thick.
So let's talk about the Lions then a little bit, because you mentioned that Ken and you were a little bit of a rivalry, and you mentioned that Jerry wasn't on your A list and stuff like that. But they were
there was no rivalry between Ken and I. I really loved Mikey Burnett. I thought Mikey Burnett was going to be like, and I really loved his brother too, who represented him. I thought Mikey Burnett was going to be like the shit. And then Ken got a hold of Mikey and twisted his brain around. And then also Mike became an enemy of mine. And I couldn't believe it. And Mikey's brother, who I've forgotten his name, I don't know how this happened, but Ken basically brainwashed Mikey into,
His
more
brother's name
money
is
or
Scott
this.
Burnett. His brother came to my dad's viewing when he passed away. Scott and Mikey, they live in the same area as me.
What a nice guy.
Yeah,
I remember him as being a really nice guy.
yeah.
And
Yeah,
I remember Mikey turning on me like I was his worst enemy. And I just thought heck of him. I thought he was going to be like the future because he could defend the tackle and he could box. I mean, you didn't need any more than that. If you could defend the tackle and you could box, you're Laverne fucking Clark. You're fucking.
Ken was a cult of personality because
He was a what?
like a cult of personality because he brainwashed those guys. I mean, I've heard that on the week of the fight with Miletich, that he knocked Mikey out, and that's just Ken's ego in the gym. How is a 230-pound guy knocking out 150 pounds?
Wait! Stop! He's not a 230-pound guy. He's as big as a 185-pound man can get on drugs.
Yeah.
Let me be clear about this.
And I agree. The steroids and other drugs and stuff became so much of Ken. Ken, Jerry and Mikey have both refused to do interviews because I don't think they want to talk and delve into that because I think they're hurt. And I think Ken hurt them. You know what I mean? I think Ken did damage to them. And that's my honest opinion because I think Burnett, I know Burnett very well. Burnett used to drive to our shows from Oklahoma to Indiana to come and hang out and see our shows and stuff.
All I can tell you is if you asked Mikey Burnett if John Perretti was his friend, I thought we were. I mean, I rolled with him and rolled with him and rolled with him and boxed with him. And, I mean, I just thought he was terrific. But obviously, he was told back a certain way towards me. And that changed everything. I don't know what to say. The Miletich Burnett fight was incredibly disappointing to me. It was a loss on my record that I thought was going to be great, and I was humiliated about that. So, what can I tell you?
Now, what about Bolander? Now, Bolander was a competitor, though. He was a hard-nosed guy, even if maybe the physical talent or whatever wasn't there. Now, he took out Jackson, and talk about him. What would you have done with him ongoing in matchmaking? Because these guys, the Lions Den guys, and then we'll talk about Pete Williams because Pete knocked out Coleman, and they had a few guys.
I have a Pete Williams story that you're going to shit your pants on. But anyway, but Jerry, as a person, I like Jerry a lot.
Did you roll with him?
I can't remember. I did not shy away from the bigger animals. In fact, some of those bigger animals got beat by me, so I did not shy away from them. I just liked him, I like that, that he was disfigured. I like that. He seemed underdogish, but you got to remember, this is a great Todd. This is a great interview, Todd, because I'm gonna step on a lot of dicks here, and I don't know what's gonna happen. I don't know if people really say, did you know that Todd is interviewing Perretti again? I don't know if they're giving you enough credit for this shit because I think that they're really avoiding what you're doing by taking the fossil out of the ground. as myself. But let me go back. So I think I don't know what happens, you know, when you hang around with a Ken Shamrock and you decide to like beat people up in the casinos and it's just like stupid shit, right? Because cocaine's a rough drug, I don't know, I thought the Lions Den was like this. I remember
Chaos.
Frank's father, and I just loved it. I loved the whole thing about it. I thought it was just great. I was really happy to really find that place. But I don't know. It just was too much show going on. Just gotta remember Pancrase was a work. Did I say that? Or should I repeat that, Todd?
No, I mean, I've heard you say it before. Before every interview, I heard you say those kind of things.
Pancrase was a work.
Now, you elaborate 100%, like all of Boss's fights.
And I am telling you that Pancrase is a work. I'm not telling you that Boss Rutan did a fake fight. I saw what happened to those guys when Boss was there. I know what it's like to get kneed by Boss Rutan. I understand, and a lot of people will say, oh, well, my fights were never works, but other people's fights were works. So the escalator, you get on that fucking escalator and it gets off of the escalator, and new talent on the escalator and gets off the escalator. You want to show me fights? You want to show fights to me right now, and I'll watch them and I'll tell you if they're work or not. I can do that. I have that ability. I mean, I don't know. It's innate. I'm a visual person. I don't know what to tell you, but I know what a fake fight looks like.
Yeah, no,
Okay?
I agree completely.
So I'm not saying you bring Boss Rutan on this fucking thing. I'll debate him about that too. The point I'm trying to make, and I go way back with him, is that I'm not saying that Boss's fights were fake. I saw what happened to those people in those fights. The reason that I loved Boss Rutan and brought him along was because I watched him in Pancrase. And we hit it off. We were drinking buddies.
It's hard
Boss
to drink
Rutan.
with. It's hard to drink with Boss. I was with him at one time in a bar in Sweden.
I didn't say that I was drinking a case of fucking Heinekens with him. I said that we were drinking buddies. I used to bring him to like microbrew bars in California and stuff, and ask him what he wanted. And it was like 800 beers on tap at my father's office, and he would say, "I want a Heineken." And I'm like, "You can't do this. There's no fucking Heineken."
I'll tell you a story. I was with him in a bar in Sweden one time, and he goes, "We're talking at the bar," and he goes, "I'm going to go to the bathroom." And
Right there.
yeah,
At the
bar. That's exactly what he did, John.
You can't. Actually,
I know you know.
I'm not allowed to tell certain Boss Rutan stories. I swore to him. To this day, I swore to him, gave him my word, which means a lot to me, that I would never repeat the stories about things that happened with me and Boss together. Never.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to do it.
Much respect. Yeah, I'll tell you.
Now I'll tell you a Pete Williams story. You want to hear a great Pete Williams story?
Yes, do that.
Oh my God, I liked him so much. That fucking guy was just so talented. I just thought he was great. However, we were now I'm laughing at even just now I'm laughing. We were in the fucking airport, and I don't remember, all the fighters were there, but I don't remember what airport it was. But he fucking remembers. I can tell you this. Now I had this little thing because I had this world-class right leg. I don't know if you've ever seen pictures, but I'm not fucking Joe Rogan sky kicking. You know what I mean? Like all with all his Brazilian bravado now. But I had a world-class right leg, even Billy Wallace. Right? Anyway, so I had this little thing I did, right? Where I'd take my Onitsuka tigers and I would pull the heel off of them and fold it down. So I was wearing my Onitsuka. And I used to practice this shit. And I would throw a roundhouse kick and whip my fucking sneaker off and hit people. It was like, I used to practice it when I was young, right? Pete Williams was like being really arrogant with me at the airport or something. And I fucking flipped that fucking shoe and hit right in the head. Well, that motherfucker, he chased me through the fucking airport. I was screaming and very theatrically and under chairs, over fucking, and everybody's there witnessing this cracking up. And I thought he was going to kill me.
And it's funny because Pete's actually kind of mild-mannered. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but not that moment. I mean, and just as he'd go to grab me, I'd get out and I'd slip out, and then I'd be.
That's awesome.
It was I don't remember what thing, but you could figure it out when Pete Williams fought and what airport it was because we could. And oh my God, it was hilarious. Although I was like, oh my God, he's going to kill me.
Well, what were your thoughts on the Pete Coleman fight?
Oh, I love that fight.
That is certainly one of your top 50, right? That when you said that you were 50 of the, that's one of them.
I love Pete Williams, and I knew he was just so fast, and I also knew that Coleman was incredibly dangerous, but. And no offense to Mark, but he was only dangerous in one position.
Or 5 minutes dangerous.
Well, no, it wasn't. I didn't think the fight was going to go like that. But I knew what he was going to do because he would have done it. I would have done exactly what he did. I might not have accomplished it like he did. He was just fucking great. But Coleman was dangerous. When he was the aggressor and attacking someone with the anvil factor, which I coined, right? It just means your head's on the fucking ground and he's hitting you. He was fucking dangerous. And he was very ballistic and, he was almost his own worst enemy.
Yeah. Now let me ask you this, because now let's get into philosophy here, because at some point in this era, headbutts became illegal, and Coleman with headbutts almost becomes unbeatable. You know what I mean? And so, what are your thoughts on headbutts?
Well, you know what my thoughts are because you know what the rules were for extreme fighting. I didn't have to compete with anybody for those rules. I fucking made those rules. So I made those rules, and those rules got all fully adopted. So it wasn't like there was some Neanderthals in the fucking ring, and then you had the UFC changes it all to this incredible sport. That's not how it went down. Yes, were there headbutts and yes, did they happen? Yes.
Yeah, you liked headbutts, or at least allowed headbutts in extreme, because I remember actually I've traced it back. I think one of the first like headbutt knockouts that we saw was Gary Myers against Tom Glanville, right? And that was on your show,
right? And Tommy's dead too, right?
Yeah, we're losing people, and that's why we got to do more interviews, man. You know what I mean? But so as
Gary Myers was represented by Phyllis Lee, who I loved. I loved Phyllis Lee.
What was your love for her? She had to know Jean LaBelle, right? She
of course she knew Jean, but
I think she fought Jean's mom, or she as a pro wrestler. There's some pedigree there, and Phyllis is a person that I absolutely love. I mean, I went to Brazil with her many times, and I helped her with fighters and stuff, and I brought along a couple of her guys like Chris Lytle and things. So like Phyllis is someone I friggin'
Phyllis's claim to fame was that she said that I saved her life. and I did, because I got her off prednisone, which was killing her. But I loved Phyllis, and I loved that she was raucous. And I love that she had a huge heart, and she got abused by so many of her fighters. And her relationship with me is why she had fighters in fights, but she had some gemstones, and then she had some mediocre people that I just wouldn't take, but I loved Phyllis Lee.
Yeah, no. That's where we have a mutual bond in, on my side anyway. It's like Phyllis is a person that, can be cartoonish, or, people may not take her seriously, but I believe that she was a groundbreaking person. Like, she was also actually Pancrase's contact in the United States for a long time, so she was a conduit for a lot of fighters.
So if I'm really close, excuse me, I stepped on you. I'm really close with Phyllis Lee, which I was, right?
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Everybody knows that, right?
Yep.
I loved Phyllis Lee, and I tried to help her physically and a lot of stuff, but I loved it. So if I'm that close with Phyllis Lee and I say Pancrase is a work, information is everything.
Yep. No, for sure. That's why this interview is important. I believe it, even if no one watches it, man. John, thank you. Because, I remember being with Phyllis. She took Adrian Serrano to fight Vanderlei in Brazil. And Adrian is probably one of those guys that you mentioned, probably not up to your standards for the UFC and stuff. You know what I mean?
Really nice guy, beef fighter.
Yeah, and he fought Vanderlei Silva in Brazil. I was at that show, and Adrian knew. Adrian knew he was on a different level. He went the night before the fights. He bought a box of cigars and smoked them on the beach. That's not. He knew what he was in for, and he tried. But and Phyllis, that's why she gets a bad reputation, because that's not a match that, a true manager might, avoid that fight. But, she needed the money and things like that. I respect Phyllis Lee, and I love her. I love her, and I respect her memory.
I got nothing bad to say about Phyllis. I'm a lot of people, laughed at her, and I think I think you were very articulate just then. You said she was cartoonish, and I think that a lot of people thought so.
Yeah,
But I always, you got to understand this though about me. I always defend the underdogs. And I fucking don't like bullies. My father was a fucking monster bully. So, if I smell that in you, I don't like it.
Yeah, no, I had to go because I speak Spanish, and that helps me with Portuguese. I had to go to the airport. Phyllis's bags were lost an entire show in Brazil, and she wore the same shirt for like 4 days, and I had to go back and forth with her to the airport and stuff. And it's like, those are some of my greatest memories of her, just her being sincere, like, thank you for the help. And she was just,
And
a tough over.
She was very religious. And anyway, so what else you guys want to talk about besides my friend Phyllis being dead?
So where are we? What UFC have we gotten up to here? Because this is supposed to be a UFC thing.
You got the fucking computer in front of you, not me.
Yep. No. I'm asking Todd. Todd, do some work here, man.
Well, I wanted to ask you, because I was waiting to get back, but you had mentioned finding Vanderlei on the beach. I know we're kind of backtracking here a little bit, but I wanted you to tell that story because that's something that we kind of skipped over, so to speak.
So those guys, I can't remember. Oh, maybe Todd, who his manager was.
Rudy Mark.
There you go. Anyway,
I got a little surprise for you first before we continue here.
Okay, go ahead. Yes.
I got a little surprise for you here. because I know you like Scott Burnett. So I'm going to bring him in here and we'll talk with him a little bit. Because I'm close to Scott Burnett. So, I know Scott Burnett well. And we're going to bring him in here. But you can talk about Vanderlei while he's connecting here.
Thank you for this. What's Rudemar? Thank you. So
Scott, are you there?
they were training on the beach, and I think it was in Rio. I think it was in Rio, and I remember I wanted to go and see these guys because I thought that it was going to come down to the skill levels of these guys versus the jiu-jitsu guys. And I really thought that if I could get people who had skills and been practicing against the jiu-jitsu guys, and the animosity wouldn't hurt. And I thought, okay, I'm a stand-up fighter. I understand what I'm looking at here, but I was pretty mesmerized, and it was amazing.
Scott.
Yeah, no. While we get Scott's audio, I remember taking my guy to fight Rafael Cordero, the instructor for them, and we were in the hotel, and we were watching across the hotel lobby or area, like a mezzanine, and they were running and taking knee shots at a pole that they had wrapped in like pads and stuff, just running and taking the flying knee, guy after guy, and my guy was like, holy mackerel, before the fight, and he lasted 30 minutes, lost a decision. And I met Rudemar at the bar afterwards. We were both getting ice for our guys because Rafael needed ice too. But my guy was like, he actually wrote down his mother's phone number and said, here's just in case, you know what I mean? So serious guys. Those guys were so serious.
And I think your word primitive was very good, like real throwback kind of.
In progress.
Scott, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. How's it going?
Scott, you defer.
that I remember that gravel voice.
It's a little bit worse right now. I think I was down with something this last week. It's like 0 degrees in Oklahoma.
I was telling Scott that John was speaking highly of him on my show, so I thought I'd bring him on.
I've always spoke high, John Perretti.
No, he wasn't talking about you. He was talking about me.
Yeah, John was speaking highly of you.
So.
Yeah. Well, I speak highly of John as well. I dealt with a lot of characters in the boxing business, and a number of them in MMA as well. And John was always a straight shooter. John always put on the best fights, in my opinion. Looking back at the UFC, when it was in its infancy, man, they were incredible. The production, everything. I thought it was amazing what they put together. And, I had a lot of great conversations with John, and we agreed on a lot of things, especially about, in the infancy of MMA or NHB at that particular time. There was a lot of phony shit going around, and a lot of people that were, claiming this and claiming that. And John and I saw eye to eye on just about everything we talked about as far as I was concerned. And we had a lot of good conversations about the direction of the fight game and everything else. So it's good to see you again, John.
Nice to see you, sir.
Absolutely.
So I was talking before about Mikey, and that I thought that Mikey and I were really close, and I was so excited. I thought Mikey was the fucking future. And I took a lot of grief for the Miletich Burnett fight. I mean, I don't know if you know this, but I got laughed at. And I thought that Mikey was going to be with me for just forever, because, I rolled with him. And I was really confused by the whole introduction of Ken Shamrock into the Mikey world.
You
remember this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Mikey, of course I managed Mike. He needed a lot of direction all the time. And he got led and other astray, which a lot of fighters, and Todd can attest to it, get led by someone telling them this or telling them that, and they can't stay focused. So as somebody who's managing them or working with them, John, you know as well as I do, you've got to freaking be in their ear daily and basically guiding them and saying, no, don't do that. No, fuck no, don't do that. Yes, stay right here, keep training, do what you're doing. And they need that day to day. And when they stop listening to you, they're going to run it off in a ditch. That's the way it works with a lot of fighters. Not all of them, but a good many of them need to have that direction. And Mikey was really no different. Mikey and we really haven't spoken a lot in a number of years. He and I haven't talked a whole lot in the last few years. And, I don't know what kind of resentment he has or what, but I don't have any with him, but I whenever I do go around and he starts in on me, I have to leave because it's too much,
Well, I
Too
don't know
much-
if you,
I'll say
I don't
this,
know if you guys know, but Mikey almost got killed a few years ago. A guy shot him
remember.
5 times.
I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how the hell he's alive. I mean, he's got to have 9 lives because I can name, I think 5 or 6 things that should have killed him.
Scott, I'll tell you this. Mike used to come to our show in Indiana, Hook and Shoot, with guys, Bob Voss, a guy from Oklahoma. They used to drive up there and all the time. So I know Mikey, and Mikey, I agree with you completely. Mikey is a guy that needed a manager, needed a guy to take care of him, let him concentrate on the fight stuff, and somebody else take care of the other stuff. And it's a shame that Ken's powerful, extra personality affected him, because I really think that's the resentment that Mikey has is with Ken. He won't talk shit about Ken, but he should.
No. Well, I mean, Ken, and I think all of them, let's be honest for a second, okay? One of the things that guys will get, they enjoy the highs and the lows for some fucking reason. Whatever it is between going really high and being lofty in the world of being, a world champion and being low down in the damn gutter, somewhere in between. A lot of fighters get addicted to that up and down shit. And oftentimes there's drugs involved with that. And, when that starts, I mean, you can get off in a lot of bad direction. And it could be any drugs. I'm saying, like, it could be painkillers, it could be crack, it could be anything. And I've seen it, you can only yo-yo so much, and you're definitely cutting in your fight career when you start down that path. And I saw it a lot, and I'm not naming names. No, Mikey's not going to say anything bad about Ken. I don't have anything to say bad about Ken. I think that people have an opinion about that. And,
I'll tell you a story. I interviewed Vernon White, and
I know Vernon well.
He's a nice
one of the
guy
other guys-
too.
yeah, and a great fighter, But I interviewed Vernon White, and Vernon White received a phone call from one of the Lions Den guys that Ken had overdosed and died in the ring, in the gym. And by the time he got there, Ken was back okay. They had revived him, and they were partying again. So it was extreme stuff.
Yeah, there's been a number of things. And, I've heard a lot of the stories. I was never around them when these guys did it. I've heard from a number of guys in the Lions Den, and I won't mention any names. I don't want to get anything stirred up with Ken. There was a lot of that. I think there was a lot of drugs going on around in the fight business with a lot of those fighters. And
And I knew some of the dealers, or maybe all of them.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you this. I always felt like, if Ken and the California Lions Den kind of thing, I felt like Mesger and Trey Telligman, I feel like they were much more serious guys. Like they weren't into that. John, I don't know what you felt about those guys or for your roster or whatever.
Metzger was a talented guy too, handsome guy. I liked him too. I liked them all. I just after, Ken decided he was gonna break my legs and chase me through fucking hotels and restaurants, I told him right to his face, I said, I think you're taking a little too much Anadrol here, guy. You just fucking calm your fuck. We were nose to nose, pressed nose to nose in the lobby.
Yeah, that's unfortunate that it got to that with
were you there?
I wasn't there. No, I heard about a lot of
I think Militich was there. There was a lot of guys there.
John,
Everybody disappeared. They disappeared like fucking like sharks. Like you see this giant hammerhead come along, and all the other sharks are gone.
and let me just say this: to be tough enough to face down Ken Shamrock, John, that's what separates you from like other matchmakers. That being a competitor, being just that capability. Can you imagine Joe Silva doing that? Come on.
Joe Silva was a gopher for a Bob. He didn't have any skills. In fact, when I quit, I told him, "Well, you got Joe Silva; he'll take this job."
And he did.
The point I'm trying to make here. What you eating there?
A lot too. Joe Silva got real smart with me one time on the phone. And I was like, "Listen, pal, I remember, where you were in the beginning when you were just a Klingon, and he acted like a dick." And I was like, "Whatever, man." He never acted. Perretti put the best shows together. Joe was just waiting in line to try to get. Please tell Dana Scott that I should be a freaking matchmaker. He said that about a bunch of people. He can say what he wants, but I talked to him on the phone about it, and then he acted like a dick about Mikey a few times to me. It really went to his head when he got to be the matchmaker, I felt like. And a lot of those people, it kind of changed. I don't watch it a whole lot now, to be honest with you, man.
Well, I've never watched the fight after I left, because I know the conversation I had with those guys on the phone about what they wanted to do and what they wanted to use me for, and what they were going to use my reputation for, and so on and so forth. But and I'm not trying to step on you. I haven't spoken to you in a long time, and I'd love to talk to you in the future. But these guys want me to do this show here, and I really have to continue.
No.
But
John,
thank you so much.
Any direction John wants to take the show in, we're with him, because just out of respect, you know what I mean? And Scott,
he doesn't get I just want to bring you on to kind of talk with him, but maybe we could have you on another time to do some Lions Den stuff or something.
Yeah, it was an interesting time, man. I would talk to John and be talking to somebody civil and business-like, very easy to communicate with. And then I would talk to Mikey and it would be a fucking train wreck. And I would just be like, God, man, that's what made it difficult dealing with a fighter, or even a brother being a fighter, or anything else. But not every fighter is, but a good many of them, man. It's just, it's hard to communicate with them because their head gets too fucking big.
Oh, Scott, it's great having you on, and like I said,
thank you so much, Scott.
Love to
it's great to see you.
Some stuff.
Great to see you.
Definitely.
Man.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
All right. Yeah. You guys take care. Yeah.
Too.
All right. So, Todd, you've been quiet. What other questions you have? That was a great question, by the way.
Well, I wanted to ask you about Chuck Liddell.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Because Chuck is a guy I think came from Phyllis, right?
Yes. And John Lewis.
Okay.
I met Chuck with John, and John and I were close for so long. And we were friends, and he was in my wedding party, and so on and so forth. But Chuck Liddell, he always says, "Oh, Perretti told me to that I should change my hairstyle." That's absolutely true. That is absolutely true. I thought that it was giving him like one dimension, and And
Yeah.
so he was absolutely true. But I will
I'll
tell
say
you
it.
that,
I'll say it. He looked white trash.
and I didn't want that for him. But anyway, so that's absolutely true. Now, I was training with those guys. Okay. So I knew what he could do. I knew that, he was a division something wrestler, and he was and he had a good straight right hand, which I liked. I thought he was slow. Yeah.
There's a fight with
And I
Jeremy
remember
Lawler.
John and I talking about this too. John Lewis and I. I thought he was slow, and John was like, he was in the inner sanctum. John was, he was seeing other people, and he was Vegasing, and John wanted to be the matchmaker for the UFC too, by the way. There were some guys that I wanted to, put in, including John, over and over, and I trained with, and there were guys that I think John can attest to this, that I could beat, that were in his school.
I mean, John was a Gene LaBelle guy, right?
No, John was a pre-Gene LaBelle guy.
Okay.
John is at the beginning of this crux. John Lewis was introduced to me by a friend, Dr. Peter McGuire, who was my black belt, and now Hickson's black belt, and not been forgotten. But he was in my wedding party too. He introduced me to John Lewis. John Lewis had a little garage. It was like an homage to Bruce Lee. And I was, I was a kickboxer, and fought differently. Was one-legged, and John and I, we just hit it off. We used to double date, and we just hit it off. In fact, John and I almost died together. And if it was 24 hours later, we would have died together. We drove across the bridge at 12 a.m. from Gene LaBelle's blood red cabin, and the
Big Bear
next
cabin.
day, and the next day at 4:12 a.m. That bridge fell off, and a motorcycle flew right off that bridge, and from the earthquake, which happened exactly 24 hours later, and John and I would have been dead. In fact, I used to sleep after the earthquake with my dog, my pit bull, in John's backyard for a week after that thing, because I had never experienced an earthquake before. And that fucking earthquake I slept outdoors with my dog in his backyard after that earthquake. I wouldn't sleep indoors because the place that I got crushed, and windows smashed, and doors ajar, and it was pretty heavy. I went out and rescued old people from the I was gonna say the funeral home, the old age home next door where I was living in Santa Monica. And I remember going out, and I took my dog, and I had a carabiner on his leash, and I clicked him off to a fire hydrant. And then I ran and was rescuing these people. But I looked down the street to the north, and fire was coming out of the ground. And then I looked down the street to the south, and water was coming out of the ground. Main broke. And the ground there was an aperture in the ground that would just zigzagged along, kind of like a cartoon, like a Roadrunner cartoon, and it dropped down. I couldn't even see how deep. So basically, the road had moved, and it was vicious. And we were pulling these people, and it was fucking cold. It was like 45 degrees that morning. For whatever reason. And and John Lewis, I could talk about John Lewis for a long, long, long time.
No, John Lewis is a MMA, pioneer, no doubt. But let me ask you about this. Let's get to one of those fights Chuck Liddell, Jeremy Horn.
I don't even remember the fight.
The first fight, the first time they met, Chuck actually got submitted by Jeremy, and that was Jeremy's follow up in the UFC after the Frank Shamrock fight.
I mean, I could see that easily. I think that Jeremy was more awkward as a stand-up fighter, but he was superior on the ground.
Yeah. So that doesn't surprise you because Chuck's, a better athlete.
He kind of caught him in a
I don't know.
side choke from the
I
guard.
don't know if I don't know if I'm gonna let you get away with that.
Okay.
No, I'm not. I'm not. You think he looks like a better athlete, right? But the
You
best
said he was
athlete,
slow. You said he was slow.
I thought he punched slow. He moved a little slow. But let me Jeremy Horn. I know this that all too well because I've been beaten by guys who didn't look like shit. The best athletes look like nothing. The guys who work their fucking ass off, and like myself, who started fighting as a stand-up fighter at 139 at 5'10". I was shredded. I was probably at 4.5%. We work our ass off to be as good as those great athletes who look like fucking gas station attendants, like Jeremy. And I think I've even called him that.
Yes. Now,
What
I
about the
remember I was
wrestlers
like,
and stuff? What about the
Guys are
wrestlers like
stepping
Van
on
Arsdale
dudes.
and stuff? What about
Well,
guys
Van
like that?
Arsdale, I've spoken about. I don't know if he's ever heard what I said about him, but I just think in terms of tendon strength, I have never met anybody as strong as Mike Van Arsdale. And what show? Oh, we talked to the Contenders show.
Yeah.
We were talking about Van Arsdale forever. I mean,
yeah.
I can't say enough. I don't know what to say. I rolled with everybody, so I have a basis for judgment.
Now, one of the things that you talked about really early in this interview was Monty Cox. So let's talk about some of his guys, like Matt Hughes, for example. Like,
Matt Hughes, the first fight I ever saw Matt Hughes in, he ran across the ring, picked the guy up, turned him, and then threw him down and won the fight. And I've never seen anything like that. I thought that, I felt like Steven Spielberg, and son, you got the job. I got a match for you. Now, I forgot the guy that I matched him with, but he was a slick jiu-jitsu guy. The fuck was his name?
Brennan?
Yes, thank you. And he was good. And I think I matched him twice, didn't I?
Yeah, they fought 3 times too. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So somebody, the opposite of creative is imitative. So if someone else used them for that same match, that
Monty did.
There you go. Anyway, so and then the discovery at the Boss Root Invitational, Jens Pulver. Oh my God. And at that point in time, John Lewis was like, I mean, everybody thought that he was wonderful on the ground. After being with Gene and us training together, and we trained hard, man.
Yeah, I don't say
John
this.
Lewis was I'm sorry, John Lewis. If I don't continue with this thought, I'm gonna lose it. John Lewis was we went to Hickson's school, and Hickson had his black belt there, and John Lewis had never rolled with anybody that caliber. And John frustrated the shit out of that guy. And I remember Peter Guire was there too, I think. And and he just frustrated the shit out of him. And and we were just really proud of John that day.
Yeah. No, I don't say this with an ounce of gayness or anything like that. John Lewis is beautiful, just as an athlete, man. That's a fucking stud, man. From the early days, just unbelievable.
Yeah, he was great, and he was a great dancer, and he was pretty acrobatic, and handsome as fuck, and he was terrific, and I thought that he would beat Pulver. I thought it would be on the ground. I mean, I knew John really, really well. I knew what he could do and what he couldn't do. I knew I rolled with Jens, and we trained together. Jeremy Horn was very generous with me, I remember. And I really thought that John could beat Pulver, but I knew that Pulver was a better boxer, and I just knew that. And John fell into something that was I just don't think that John, knowing John so well, I don't think that John did things with certain fighters that helped him. I think he was with a bunch of people. John didn't have friends, he had fans. And those guys will tell you anything, and they're wrong. I remember coaching John down in Japan, and he was fighting, I think, Rumina, right? And I think he had Petinaris in the corner too, and I don't know why, but if you put me in the corner and I know you, your chances are you have a better chance of winning that fight. So I remember I realized like 2 minutes into the fight that Rumina couldn't speak English, and I was like, John, bring him over here. Drag his ass over here, right right now. Bring him over here. And I remember Rumina like looking and going, who's talking? And he would like come up, boom, 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 and bring him closer. And I said, and then, okay, John, listen to me. The next time I start talking to you, he's going to look at me to see what I'm trying to do, to tell you to do. And you're going to land that right hand on his fucking jaw. And you're going to hit him again and again and again and again. And that's exactly what he did. I said, okay, John, look at me. This is what he's going to do. And then Rumina just looked over like that. John, boom, 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 boom. And that was the end of Rumina.
Yeah.
So I as a corner man, I understood my fighters, and then, Igor dismantled Ensign in a way.
Yeah, that reminds me of Matt Hume, actually. Matt is one of those cornermen that is so in tune with what's going on that it's just amazing, And I thank you for that. Now, there was one.
Hold up. Can I ask something real quick?
Yeah, go.
I wanted
your fucking show.
Miguel, hold
on.
Your
show.
Miguel, hold on. I wanted to ask you about Pulver because I you're bringing him up, and I wanted to ask you what you thought, because I feel like maybe outside of Pat, Pulver was maybe one of those guys that the UFC didn't really maybe want as their champion.
Oh, I did.
I know you did, but I'm just saying in general. Yeah, I would like to hear your feelings on what you felt of Pulver, because I know later on, I don't think the Zuffa-led UFC really wanted him as their belt holder.
Well, I can't answer that.
Right? No, I wanted your.
I have no basis for judgment on that.
I wanted to know your feel.
I thought Pulver was amazing. In fact, I can tell you something that Jens Pulver doesn't even fucking know. The protagonist in my novel has one blue eye and one brown eye. Why? From Jens Pulver. That's how great I thought he looked. And he was just great. He was just, I just loved him. In fact, he was a kickboxer that I wish that I would have been. I mean, that's how fucking much I liked him. I thought he was just fucking great. And just because, some manipulative fucking organization decides that there's something that they don't like about somebody, or there's something that they like about something,
Or the manager.
those are beliefs, and beliefs are what is beloved of you. You choose your beliefs, whether they're good or bad or this or that, or I do other podcasts besides yours, Todd, on philosophy and such. So I thought Jens Pulver was just the future. He was just fucking great. And guess what? I was right.
Yeah.
What did you think about the way the UFC treated him, the Zuffa-led UFC?
When?
How did, when he was their champion, it didn't seem like they wanted him to be.
No, they canceled the division.
Yeah,
There you go. So think about that. Think about why they would do that.
That's what I wanted to maybe, I don't know, offer it as a close, because John's philosophy about the fight game is so pure that the UFC was faced with the fact that Monty Cox, as a manager, had 5 of their 6 champions, Tim Sylvia, Matt Hughes, and stuff like that. And I present to you as a matchmaker, and I think John may agree, I'm hoping he does, is it's my job to get him beat then. I gotta work to get better guys. I gotta go and do that. The pyramid, and not cancel Monty Cox. You know what I mean? That's the ugly part of what they did. They actually canceled the weight division. There were years, BJ Penn, I think, was involved also in that, but they canceled the 155-pound weight division because they couldn't deal with the fact that, they weren't in control completely. And I don't think John operates that way. I think John would have taken it to the next level and been like, all right, let me find the next level of guy.
I would have got him beat.
Yeah, that's exactly that.
I know it. I know I would have got him beat, because no one is unbeatable.
Yeah, and that's a part of it too. As a matchmaker with negotiations, a guy has won 3 in a row. He's due a raise and stuff like that. So, hey, let's see what he's got. You know what I mean? We can work with that. And if he overcomes that, then yeah, he's due the money. And I don't think John was a guy who was going to be like, no, I don't want to pay him, because I think John wanted to pay his fighters.
Hang on. So let's be clear. Todd, this is really important, because people might ask you this. I never dealt with the money. I wanted to be pure. I didn't do the money. I didn't do it in extreme fighting, and I didn't do it in the ultimate. I didn't handle the money. I didn't have to negotiate a 3-time winner or such. I only cared about my athletes, and I only cared about commentating, which I got taken off the air for saying, and there it is. Bob told me, you can't say, and there it is. I said, why not? He goes, because it looks like the show's not live. I said, that's the stupidest fucking thing I've ever heard, Bob. I said, of course it's fucking live. Yeah, but you see things that are going to happen before they happen. So everybody's going to know that you've seen this before. I thought, that's fucking ridiculous. But he took me off the air.
Now, but how would you handle a situation where guys won 3 in a row and you got to matchmake him tough? You're in other words, let's say you're trying to get him beat, or you want to show a real test.
I want everyone to know that everyone's beatable.
But what about the money end? Because how
I didn't do the money end.
So
I
you
was
weren't
pure.
involved in that at all. Okay.
No. And
that's
they didn't have to do it.
that's awesome.
And someone, I think it was Monty Cox was I think he was defending me. I could be wrong. Get him on the fucking phone.
We can do that.
Because I know. So and because or people said that I was taking bribes. And I think Monty said, do the math. I think that's what he said. Do the math. It's impossible.
Yeah.
What do you get? $5?
Yeah. No,
I
John,
could be wrong. I could be wrong. But I believe it was Monty Cox.
you know, if you're wealthy, it's not from MMA. You know, I say that with respect.
I've been married too many times to be wealthy. But you got to understand that I'm a voracious reader. You know, you can just, I mean, that's just me, you know. So and I'm a big researcher. So I'm very passionate about what I do. I'm a passionate writer. I'm a passionate, I mean, this is just the way I am. So me going around on my own dollar and finding talent, you know, wasn't sitting in my living room watching VHS tapes, you know. And
That's exactly.
I certainly wasn't taking bribes, and I certainly wasn't, you know, getting kickbacks, which seemed to be in vogue at the time.
That's exactly. I don't want to beat up on Joe Silva, but it's easy to receive VHS tapes. I mean, I was on the road, going to shows, going to Japan, going to Brazil to analyze, to see what we have. And let me ask you this. Maybe it's a good way to close for Todd, because I know we've been going long here. But I know that you spent like some time in Peru and Cusco in your younger years. And I know that they've got this kind of brutal, like boxing, like, you know, underground kind of fighting that they do there and stuff. Were you witness to any of that stuff in Cusco, Peru?
Uh, let me be clear. The first time I went to Peru, I went with Women's Day magazine. I was a photographer's assistant for Al Rubin. But the next time that I went to Peru, I loved Peru. So I went there as a bodyguard, and I worked for Sicilians in Peru as a bodyguard. So I don't need to really elaborate on the things that I did in Peru, but I'm aware of what you're talking about.
Okay. Did it impress you? Is it fun? I mean, that's amazing. Give us a little bit of without getting into the details. How raw is it to be in the mountains to see that?
Well, there's a lot of money involved, and there's a lot of there's a lot of stuff going on. I was there for the revolution. I was there for the black dogs being hung from lampposts and tanks blowing up shit. I know a lot about Peru. I mean, it's in my memoirs.
That's why I asked. Yeah, and that's why I was going to say use it as a plug for your book, because John talks about this in his books.
So, you know, the thing is that there's a lot of stuff that happened in Peru that weigh heavy on me. You know, I walked into a Nazi banquet, and I was just so thankful that I had blue eyes at that time. And I'll tell you, you know, that you know, this stuff, you know, is real. You know, it's not just talk. And Peru was an amazing time for me. I went back a bunch.
Todd, I'll let you wrap it up if that's what you want. If not, I'll go on to UFC 20 and 21 and
No, I mean, I know we've gone long, and I always appreciate John taking the time, and
good
you
Lord.
know,
Thank you.
it's always awesome to have him, on the show. And like he had said before, I'm honored that I'm somebody who can bring you on shows and, you know, give people a chance to hear your voice, because I think it's important. I'm a fan of the University of Alabama. Nick Saban retired. Some people are saying they wanted to stay around sport because his voice is important. And I think your voice is important. I know you haven't stayed around the sport, but I think your voice is important, and you could have an impact still.
It's not only important. If John doesn't talk and we don't get this, so much, I mean, just so much history will be lost.
Right.
He is ground zero for so much stuff that this is groundbreaking. And John, I'm grateful, man. Thank you for everything. Thank
No,
you
thank
for
you guys.
and your honesty, man, because you are an amazing person from the very beginning. Just the way you carried yourself, the way you visioned the sport, and we're not in the sport now in your vision, and that's sad because I'd rather be in John Perretti's world.
Well, the thing that's interesting to me is that, you get, I remember when we hired Joe Rogan as a backstage interviewer, and he was basically just a sycophant. He just was a fan, and he was a very talented guy, and as a comedian, and he was involved in a lot of people who um, later to become incredibly wealthy and powerful. And I know he remembers this stuff because I was there when he was birthed. Okay, so
Yeah,
and I've wanted. Hang on, because this is really important. And then I've always wanted to be on his show, not because he is so important, because of the disinformation that has come out of his mouth. So that spewing of disinformation is very, very hurtful and pointed towards me. And I think if you're going to talk the big talk, you really need to understand that there's one person that is not impressed with certain things, and especially the rewriting of history. And I would just love to talk to him because we have very similar interests also, not in the sidekick, but in 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 things about history and in things about identified flying objects and journeys out of the body. And there's a lot of things that I could talk openly with him, but I have been kept on a back burner and not allowed to speak with him.
Yeah, I cannot believe that he would not have you on this podcast. It's ridiculous. I could tell you, Joe Rogan has begged me for tickets to a show, the Abu Dhabis that we did in California. So I know Joe as well, and I'm also a little impressed. And like you, John, I'll go back and refer people to your book. Somewhere in your book, you say the promoter should never make more money than the fighters. And
What do
how
you
how
think?
how
What do
does
you
that
think?
how does that apply to the announcers and the podcasters? And Joe and the two most richest people off of this sport are Dana and Joe. And
Well,
that's
Joe's had, he was backed and he is a talented guy and he went on to, become whatever he is now. And the other guy was a box aerobics instructor who had really, really powerful friends. So, I mean, what I'm trying to say is, they all think that they're fucking,
before he bought the
tough
UFC.
guys. They all think they're tough guys, like,
Yeah.
everybody's a fucking black belt in jiu-jitsu now. You just, I don't know what to say. I'm 67 years old. It's odd that you would be fearful of me.
John, you deserve so much more voice. I'll tell you this. That kickboxing instructor showed up at one of my shows in Massachusetts that I did and stole my two main event fighters when he bought the UFC the next couple of weeks or the next couple of months. And history goes from there. I guess I didn't impress him enough to, bring me along. And that's okay.
I've never met him.
Yeah.
I've never met him.
I met him that day. I shook his hand, and that's it. Never.
I've never met him. People say, "What do you think of Dana White?" I said, "I don't know him." He was
Well, I'm
box
sure they're the
aerobic
reason
instructor.
why you're not on Rogan's shows because of them. I'm sure Rogan would love to have you on your show. A lot of people would watch it.
Well, you're giving him a lot of credit, but I've spoken to him. And I've heard him say, people call me all the time and say, Joe Rogan said that you were the best announcer and this and that. So what? Joe Rogan said that, and then they type in, they go, why isn't John Perretti on your show? And then he doesn't answer.
No, I got to say this.
So
that you are the best announcer is an insult. You're the best matchmaker. You're the best analyst of talent. You're the best at that. And that's what carried the sport from UFC 16 through when they bought it. Because if that elevation of understanding of it as a sport had not happened, then we'd probably be dead. You and Dan Lambert, because Dan threw so much money at supporting things. Between you and Dan Lambert, if in those twilight years in the 90s into 2000, if you guys had not been there, we wouldn't even be watching the sport.
Yeah, so I mean, I really appreciate what you're saying, but I have a hard time swallowing it. But thank you. And if your aunt had balls, she'd be your uncle.
Yeah, I agree with you. I feel that way too. We had a big company. I had a run where we were spending millions of dollars on shows and stuff, and we're dead. 15 years now.
The point really, my point here, and to be succinct and to help Todd end this fucking thing, is that why are you afraid of me and what I'll say? Am I going to say that you were nothing? You were somebody that we hired to talk backstage. I don't. What's the fear? Because I could ask him questions. I don't even have to answer questions. Can you imagine the questions I would ask? Oh, they would be fucking scary. They'd be scary questions. You'd have to edit the show. You'd have to redact me, which is exactly what they did. They redacted me. So yeah, I just don't see that I could be that big a threat anymore.
I think his employer is scared.
No, they're rewriting history. So
his employer is terrified of you going on that show. No doubt about it.
I wouldn't know.
Oh, no
Yeah,
doubt
no,
about it. The UFC would be terrified of what you're going to say if you went on there.
they always
Come
say
on.
the victors write history, and I guess they won, and that's the sad part of it, because their rewrite of history is forgetting us, forgetting John, and they wouldn't be there without John. They simply would not be there without John Perretti.
Could you imagine Joe Rogan going to Dana White and saying, "Hey, Joe, I'm getting ready to have John Perretti on my show. What do you think his response would be?" No, absolutely not.
Sick. It's sick.
No doubt about it. I mean, what do you guys think? Absolutely not.
I don't know. I just
I
don't
do.
see.
I
I don't
do. He
see
would
what
say no.
what threat I am.
He doesn't
No,
want the fans to hear what you're going to say
just
about
the
the
reality of it.
UFC,
The
about
reality
him.
of the roots of it is it's just so corporate now. It's a completely corporate entity now that's completely about making money, and
But it wasn't. We didn't
and
own the fighters.
and that's the thing is there's a purity and an art to it that they've glossed over, and that's what scares them, is that people will understand that, because they're avoiding that now. Todd,
It's that it's got a little bit of it's got a little bit of conspiracy, to it.
yeah,
And I find it because I am away from it. I find it to be disconcerting that that
John,
they could not defend themselves.
let me ask you a question. Have you been airbrushed, photoshopped out of pictures?
Absolutely.
It's as simple as that. That's
In fact, I think Dr.
how
Peter
ins-
McGuire said it, really, really early on. You know, they would getting rid of John Perretti would make Stalin proud what they did. It's in writing. It was a great article written. It's in my book, because I got permission to put the whole article in on who coined mixed martial arts, and it was up on the website. What is that website for? For all this crap. But it was up there for a long time, and you could just put it on. It's gone.
how insane.
Gone.
I mean,
That article is gone because it makes it. They wanted to interview the so and so, and then so and so didn't respond, and this and that, and then they said, well, who did this, and Zuckerman said it was Peretti, and it was in the 80s that he did this, and then and so, and then someone else gets interviewed, and they said, oh, it was Peretti. Oh, and it was Peretti, and then it was like John Krakauer, right? He writes a fucking book, right? He interviews me like 6 times. He puts all my quotes in, quotes that that I said, right? And he puts no source on the quotes. What is that about? That's so unprofessional. You're a professional writer and journalist, and you refuse to fucking put my name on the quotes. That's just fucked up, man. It's just fucked up. And I'm sorry, Todd, that I'm going long, but that shit hits a nerve.
John, like it deserves. You are, like I said, a pioneer, and probably the first guy that guided the sport in the right direction. And to that, we all owe you a fucking huge thank you, including Todd and I, for what we're doing. What we're doing right now is because of you.
I told Todd, I don't know if it was in text or was Todd, I don't remember, or we were talking on the phone. I said, Todd, I'll debate anyone. Were we on the phone, Todd? I can't remember.
It was
Todd,
on
you
the
remember?
show.
Todd, you remember our MMA guru interview where I was like, I'll take that fight. I'll take that fucking fight. This
Right.
is some YouTube guy that talks about the fights now, It's like, come on, man, let's go. Let's talk, And I know John doesn't follow sport now, well, I'll take that fight. These guys are idiots, man. This is ridiculous.
Anyway, so I put it out there. I'll debate anybody because I was there
Yeah.
and they weren't. Quite simply, I mean, I may be a fossil, but I was there. And I think it was Boss who said it. It was Boss in an interview. He said, "You know what people don't talk about very much is how good a fighter he was. I was." No, and people don't really discuss that. They're always like, "Oh, he's a promoter." Well, I was never a promoter. I just wanted to create a sport. As Frank said, I just want to be the best in the world. I want to be the best fighter in the world. That's the quote. And that's what I wanted to be. But nobody is Frank Shamrock.
Yeah, no. That's why I think you're the respect you're due as a matchmaker is transcendental. Is that people could be bookkeepers or even analysts of the fights and stuff like I am. I'll put my fucking talent against of analyzing talent against anybody, but I defer to you because I haven't rolled with people. You know what I mean? I'm not qualified to do that. And that's what makes you super special and a super unbelievable piece to the early fucking history of the UFC. It's just transcendental. You're a machine, man. You're the man.
Well, anyway, I think that's the definition of a has-been.
We all get old, man. That's it.
It's better than it never was.
That's true.
And maybe we can Joe Rogan doesn't have to bring me on. Maybe you can bring Joe Rogan on and we'll debate.
Yeah, that would be great. And there's still more podcasts I'd love to do with you because there are guys from the early days like Bart Vale, Walt Bayless, and
Yeah.
a myriad of guys like that from the early days that I would love to get your opinion on. So
I would gladly give it. I mean, it's just let's let Todd, let the horses out of the barn, and I thank you guys. I thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I guess on Tuesday I go to the academy, it's Gus George Police Academy, and I teach there for a week. The new graduates, and today I was teaching this like linebacker young man who was 5'8" and he could dunk a basketball. That's how great an athlete he was. But I was teaching Wing Chun again. I haven't been teaching Wing Chun for a while, but I was teaching Wing Chun for the last 2 days. So that's what I'm doing, and I'm writing 6 hours a day, and I'm
and check
very
this guy out.
excited.
Just look at this. Look at him in this video. You're 67?
I am 67.
It's like, how many 30-year-olds you can find that are in this shape? This man's a machine, man. Thank you, John, for everything.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I wish you good night.
Yeah. And like I said before, the things that I'm doing this for, I hope you get the same things out that you're open for. I hope other people look to you for knowledge and, input. Again, because I think your voice is important. I hope you get on Rogan. I hope other people start to recognize you because you deserve this recognition. It's, and that's just the way it is.
You blow up, man. Blow up, John. Go out there.
I'm honored that
Yeah.
that we were kind of some of the people that got the opportunity to do this, you know.
Yeah, because you don't know what's going to happen, you know. And people disappear from this planet pretty quickly, you know.
Yeah.
So you never know. You know, I lost Gene, and that was
Right.
devastating. You know, did I mention that last time?
You talked about Gene a lot.
Yeah.
Well, the
talked
thing that was very interesting to me was that, and I'll end with this, is that night that Gene died, I had this lucid dream with him in it, and I hadn't dreamt about him probably, only out of fear, probably 20 years prior. But he was telling me all about, like, his son was so fucked up, and this was fucked up, and the neighborhood he lived in is all fucking thisers and thaters, and he was, you know, he was very racist. And then I was asking him about Midge, and you know, and I just it was a long dream in my mind, and it was a lucid dream because I was taking it to different places. It was like an interview. And then I woke up and I found out the next day that's when he passed.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's truth.
Yeah.
That's
And,
true.
and,
That's what happened.
and that's a great spot to close on, because John
Yeah.
Perretti spitting the fucking truth is all we could expect.
All right. I appreciate it, guys.
Thank you,
Good
sir,
night.
so much.
Great to talk to you, sir. Everybody, take care.